It's a One Detroit about powerful, fascinating, and intriguing women this holiday weekend. Meet the woman leading the charge to bring Detroit's information and technology into the future, Detroit CIO Beth Niblock. Plus, political strategist and Fox News pundit Donna Brazile. Also coming up, Michigan's first female Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, Bridget McCormack. And we'll finish off with an invitation to a unique supper club. I'm Christy McDonald. Join me. One Detroit is coming up.
Masco Corporation is proud to manufacture innovative and environmentally friendly products for the home. Delta faucets, craft-made in Merillat cabinets, and Behr brand paints have all been designed with you in mind. Masco and its family of companies, serving Michigan communities since 1929.
Support also provided by the W.K. Kellogg Foundation, a partner with communities where children come first. The Cynthia and Etzel Ford Fund for Journalism at Detroit Public TV. The Detroit Journalism Engagement Fund, and by
Business Leaders for Michigan has 5 priorities to make Michigan a top 10 state. Achieve a balanced budget, cut long-term debt, fix our roads, improve all levels of education, further economic growth, plan for a stronger Michigan. How does diversity bring energy to us all? At DTE Energy, we believe that it's the contributions of all that build great communities. As a company, we grow stronger by welcoming the unique perspectives of everyone. As community members, we support our state's broad culture and heritage. From working closely with women and minority-owned suppliers to embracing our local cultures, DTE Energy is powering diversity. The DTE Energy Foundation is a proud sponsor of Detroit Public Television.
also brought to you by Ally and viewers like you. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Christy McDonald, and welcome to One Detroit. We are spending the holiday weekend along the Detroit riverfront, and we have a special show coming up for you, all focused on powerful and intriguing women. Coming up, you'll meet Detroit's Chief Information Officer and hear how she helped bring the city from the 70s into the present. Then, Stephen Henderson talks with Democrat political strategist and Fox News contributor Donna Brazile. Also ahead, Nolan Finley sits down with State Supreme Court Chief Justice Bridget McCormack. She talks about the perception people have of the court. And then you're invited to a pretty special supper club that celebrates culture and tradition with comfort food. That is all coming up. Well, we're going to start with Detroit's Chief Information Officer, Beth Niblock. It was 5 years ago that Mayor Mike Duggan went down to Kentucky and recruited her and asked her to take on Detroit's antiquated IT system. From paying parking tickets to office emails to tracking crime to open data, I really wanted to get a sense of how Beth and her staff of 136 have changed the way that people can interact with the city and can connect. So we just head on in here. It must have been overwhelming when you first walked into this and saying, oh my gosh, we're back in the 80s, or?
In some cases that would have been good. I mean, our payroll system got put in 1978. We're now in the process of, we've converted part of us to that, and we're in the process, hopefully by the end of the year, to be completely off of that. So in some cases, 80s was advanced. I also think I felt like I had a better idea of what I was walking into because I was part of the team that the Obama administration brought in of municipal CIOs to come in and talk about what we could do, what could be done in Detroit with technology. So I felt like I knew, and then you get here and then there's like, oh.
And you have $90 million worth of projects
Right.
to immediately get started on. What exactly were those projects?
So in some cases they were really very fundamental, like replacing all the desktops because they were so old we couldn't put security patches on them. People were on different versions of Microsoft Office, so if you got the email, which there was a lot of issues with the email system not working, so it was perfectly legitimate for somebody to say, I never got that email.
So, you're talking about the inner kind of communication of the inner workings of City Hall, but then starting to interface with the public to making sure that the accessibility to the city and city services was much easier than it had been for years.
That was exactly the plan. What do we need to do internally so that we can have access to the computers and technology, and we can email, and we have new systems, because the whole point is so that we can better serve our citizens. The mayor obviously is very committed to the cameras in the corridor, so we're doing a lot with cameras so that we're able to, really curtail illegal dumping, which is, has been a big issue. We put in body cameras, integrated body cameras for police, so in their in-vehicle cameras and their cameras that they wear work in conjunction with one another. We've put in, obviously, a new computer-aided dispatch and 911 system. We brought up a new 911 center. We put in a new jail management system, a new fire and EMS records management systems. We've got the online permitting system that went live in December. We have online electronic plan review systems through the Detroit Water and Sewer, as well as DTE. We've got all the DivDat machines that are in CVS's. So, there are a lot of folks that pay cash and we don't want them to have to come downtown to pay their taxes or their water bills. So we've got DivDat machines all over Detroit and some in other counties where you can go in and you can pull it up and you can pay your administrative hearing fees, your water bill, your electricity bill, your DTE bill, or anything else.
How does transparency and having that kind of data available to people in the city, how does that change the way they view government, do you think? Or how does that help them interact with the city more?
Well, one, I think it's the people's data. And so it used to be very hard to get information from us. You would have to go through the FOIA process to get data. I mean, for other things, you still have to do that. But to get the data, it was very difficult to get it. And so by putting it out there, it gave us a place. One, it says, here's your data. And two, I think it really gave us a same set of starting point. So it would be that government would come into the room, we had a set of data, and the other, the people we were working with may or may not have it. So it was interesting to me through our innovation team that puts all the data out there. We've had working groups with different neighborhood groups to say, here's the data that we're seeing about your neighborhood. Now on our website, we have an address finder, so you can put your address in and see all the data that government has about your address. There's some issues in that quality of that data, and we know it, and people take it really seriously. There's a feedback form on that site and said, hey, I think there's a problem with this data, and we work with them to get the problems resolved.
That was age 21.
When we talk about technology and we make the assumption, or you talk about people are able to access on mobile devices, a lot of people do not have that connectivity in the city of Detroit. Give us a sense of the problem and give me a sense of what the city is planning to do about it.
Right now, depending on which study you read, between 40 and 60% of Detroiters do not have broadband in their home, and 40% of Detroiters don't have data plans on their phones. So that's a huge number. Part of what we're trying to do is do things via text. So you will see, like on demolitions, or on when we had to open warming centers, or if you want to know when to set out your garbage or recycling, you can do all that via text, because a lot of folks have unlimited text plans. So you can text, you can call, or you can come to the website. We have Wi-Fi now that we've committed to as a small, teensy, like the tiniest little step of putting Wi-Fi throughout all of our recreation centers, so people that come in and spend a lot of time there have connectivity there. We put connectivity at Rosa Parks Bus Center. We're working on putting it, because Detroiters spend a lot of time in transit, so as you're waiting, you can do that. We're looking at putting it in at State Fairgrounds. We are doing a pilot right now with the buses to have Wi-Fi on the buses. We can't leave Detroiters behind. So we've got to give kids, especially, you've got a lot of kids that go to the library, or their parents drive them up outside the library to try to connect, to be able to do things, and we've just got to take that barrier away and do better.
Turning now to pundit Donna Brazile. The Fox News contributor and Democratic strategist was in town recently, and she sat down with Stephen Henderson on American Black Journal to talk about the political landscape in Washington.
2016 really will go down in history as a year that we broke the rules. I mean, we've never seen a presidential season like we did in 2016. Donald Trump was a quintessential outsider. He ran against the Republican establishment. He emerged as the front runner and then the nominee of the party. But he has governed as a president who essentially tunes in response to his base, not the majority of American people. While many Americans thought that once he got in the White House that he would pivot to try to serve all of the American people. And I'm not saying that he's not trying to serve us, but I'm saying the service and the message that he provides each and every day is to keep his base, very, if you want to call it entertained, if you want to call him energized, if you want to call him inspired. But, Trump, who I do believe at this point should be much higher in the polls given the economy, remains underwater, I believe, because he has failed to really try to unify the American people. So he's gone into his re-election mode, probably in the worst shape of any president seeking a second term. But we do know from history that presidents often win second terms. So with very few exceptions, and the most recent one, of course, being George Herbert Walker Bush when Bill Clinton defeated him, and of course Jimmy Carter and Ronald Reagan. So we'll see what happens in 2020.
So one of the things that has concerned me about this administration, and I spent 5 terms covering the Supreme Court in Washington and sort of getting to know how things work there. There's a professionalization of the staffs that serve presidents that keep them from some of these excesses, right? I feel like that's not happening in quite the same way with the Trump administration, and that explains some of the things that we continue to see that might have been written off as kind of rookie mistakes in his first couple of years. Do you see that changing at all in Washington? Is this staff getting better at managing this president and this presidency?
Well, when he was first elected and he began to put people around him like Rex Tillerson and the general at the Defense Department, General Mattis, and others, everyone said, okay, well, there's enough grown-ups in the room.
Yeah.
But over the last few months, as many people have left the White House, or John Kelly, the Secretary of Homeland Security, Jeff Sessions, people kept saying, wait a minute, something is happening. I mean, there's too much, transition and change going on a constant basis. I think Donald Trump is the head chief and commander. He's running the show. Even when he goes out there and declares that the little small missile that North Korea just sent across the bay, well, that's just a small missile. Well, this is a missile from a rogue nation. This is a missile from a dictator who has threatened us. And yet Trump dismissed it as if, well, he still likes me, so everything must be okay. No, we don't know which way the president will go. All we could do every day is to pray and hope that there are people around him who know what they're doing and that they will continue to protect our country.
Yeah. You have advised presidents before on strategy, presidential candidates on strategy. If you were an advisor to Donald Trump, what would you tell him? What would you tell him to stop doing? What would you tell him to do more of?
I think I'm like most Americans. Get rid of your Twitter habits.
Put the phone down, right?
Well, whatever it is, just get rid of your Twitter habits. Look, there are a certain number of Americans who love those tweets, who follow those tweets. There are now many journalists who cover those tweets. But I think by and large, on days when he appears to be having a good moment, he tweets and then everybody basically says, wait a minute, did you see the tweet? And that's it. I mean, on a day where the economy, when they announced the new unemployment numbers, unemployment is still going down, people are finding jobs. And what does the president do? He started tweeting out about something he dislikes or a person. Right? He's constantly stepping on his own message.
Yeah. Do you feel like he would say that a lot of this is about the press and the way that we cover him? And that's different than it has been in the past. I'm the first person to say I think the press does treat him differently, and they have to approach this White House differently because all of the norms have been rewritten. I mean, the ways in which we're accustomed to a president dealing with the press are all out the window. But do you think that the Washington press deserves some blame for
Well,
the
I
way?
think I mean, let's go back to the announcement back in March of 2015. From the day Donald Trump came down those stairs, the media decided that this was an entertainment show. This was not a typical candidate, and they covered him as if he was entertainment. And they, in fact, many news outlets hired people who knew Trump so that they could talk about Trump. So there's been a Trump effect on the media. There's been a Trump effect on what I like to call our electorate. There's been a Trump effect internationally. So I think Donald Trump has accomplished one goal. He has put his name on just about everything he touches. Unfortunately, it's not always in his best interest or the country's best interest to have his name on everything.
This next interview comes from Nolan Finley. Earlier this spring, he met up with newly elected Michigan Supreme Court Chief Justice Bridget McCormack, and she talked to him about the perceptions of the court and what people should expect from their court system.
You were nominated by the Democratic Party and lean Democrat on a court that is 4-3 Republican, and yet that court unanimously elected you as Chief Justice. Doesn't happen that often, but you're pretty well determined to rid the court of any trace of partisanship.
Yeah, I think that's actually the key. I mean, you're right. Justices are nominated by political parties in Michigan,
Right.
but we do run on the nonpartisan section of the ballot, and the court has to be nonpartisan for it to be effective and for people to believe in what we do.
But that's not the perception people have of courts today, particularly of the Supreme Court.
I think that's sometimes right. I'm hoping it's less and less true, and I think it's true because sometimes people misunderstand why the court is different from the other branches of government and why it's important that it be nonpartisan. The thing about the court is it has to be able to make unpopular decisions, and by that I mean, one day unpopular to one set of partisans and the next day unpopular to the other set of partisans. And if the court is to function in a constitutional democracy the way the founding fathers want it to, it has to be able to do that. So nonpartisanship is really important, even though we have this perception.
And you drove that point home by naming David Viviano, Justice David Viviano, as your Chief Justice pro tem. David was appointed by Governor Rick Snyder, a Republican, and he's going to help you run the court.
And David was twice nominated by the Republican Party, in addition to being first appointed by a Republican governor. He was, twice nominated by a Republican convention, he's a fantastic Chief Justice pro tem. The Supreme Court has actually never had one before, but I thought it was important, both because there's a lot of work to do, and it helps to have somebody else to do it with. And David's a energetic and inspired administrator. But I also like sending the message that this court is not about one party or the other party. It really is a nonpartisan institution, and part of our message is to convince the public of that, even when sometimes the hyperpartisans don't want to believe it, or even sometimes the media, not you.
Yeah, well, maybe me sometimes. But we've seen in Michigan, and even as recently as this summer, outside interest, partisan interest, trying to pressure justices and reminding those justices, well, we nominated you and we supported your campaign. That's unseemly, and it doesn't serve the cause of justice well.
And not only, I agree with all of that, but it's also true that the public doesn't like it. And we saw that in the results of the election, because the case that you're talking about, that your paper, I think, broke a lot of the stories about, was Justice Clement. And Justice Clement was the top vote getter in this past election by a whole lot. And frankly, the independence of the judiciary was kind of on the ballot in her campaign. And that's not the only way we know it. We actually have extensive public surveys that the National Center for State Courts does about what the public wants from their state courts. And overwhelmingly this year and every other year, independence is the top thing they want out of their courts. So that's actually what, your non-lawyer family members want out of their courts. It's what my non-lawyer family members want out of their courts. And it's actually probably a small group of partisans that want something different from the court.
And you have politicians in particular throwing around phrases like activist judges and rule of law judges. What do those phrases mean to you? I
mean, an activist judge is a judge who will put his or her personal preferences above what the law requires in a given case. And rule of law judge is usually shorthand for somebody who doesn't do that, right? So, but the bottom line is people use that shorthand sometimes to disparage the other side. And I can tell you that activist judges come in every flavor. You can find them on every side. They're not just Democrats and they're not just Republicans. There are activist judges everywhere, and there are rule of law judges everywhere. So it's I find those labels to be somewhat unhelpful. Every judge's job is to apply the law to the facts of the case, even when you don't like the outcome. And find me a judge who likes every decision she's ever made, and I promise you she's not a very good judge.
So along with deciding cases and hearing appeals, as Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, you're basically the administrator for all courts in the state.
And that's actually that's where the action is, in my view. That's where that's the exciting part of the job, and the place where I think we have the ability to affect most people in the public. Most people in the public don't follow the decisions we make, and a lot of times they don't change their lives in one way or the other. You know, many of the decisions we make. But the way their local courts operate, and whether they can get their business done efficiently and feel like they've been heard and feel like they are getting good customer service at their local courts, that does matter, because everyone, you know, or not everyone, but a lot of people have had to go to their local district court or circuit court because they've had an issue with their family or with their business, and they need to know that the courts are going to provide good public service. So frankly, that's the exciting part of this job.
And finally, this 4th of July holiday weekend, I think one thing we can all agree on is that food brings us together. Think about the meals that you share with families and the tradition and the culture that goes along with it. Well, we heard about Shane Bernardo, and he started the Detroit Filipino Supper Club as a way to stay connected to his roots. And he invited One Detroit to dinner.
For sure, yeah. Today I'm cooking the meal in preparation for our supper club. It's called the Detroit Filipino Supper Club, and it's a way for those of us in the diaspora to help celebrate our culture and come together around food. These are spaces that are important for me to build socially, but also culturally and politically, because food is a really great way for bringing people together.
Oh, whoa! Wow!
So the way it started is a mutual friend introduced me and Ale together, and we were just reminiscing about all the different foods that we used to enjoy when we were growing up and how much we missed that. And we missed the camaraderie and the social aspects of coming around food, especially around the holidays. The Philippine Archipelago is made up of over 7,100 different islands. And Luzon is the north, where my people are from. The Visayas is the central region, and Mindanao is the southern region. To look at our foods is just one of the many ways to show that how nuanced and how varied our culture really is. My grandmother transitioned to ancestorhood in 2016, so fairly recently. That hit me pretty hard because when my parents were working, my grandmother was one of my main caregivers. But then growing up as an adult and having to deal with grief of losing my father and my grandmother, I can now pair the grief that I was feeling from that sense of loss with some of the what I refer to as ancestral wisdom and ancestral creativity within the food that I'm making. It's healing to be able to reconnect with our land kind of in an indirect way by preparing and celebrating some of these foods and dishes. If I were to ask you what your favorite food was, I'm sure you could name a whole list of things. If I were to ask you, is there a particular dish or food that you look for in and around your family gatherings, you could probably come up with another list. And then if I were to ask you, how would you feel if you could never enjoy those dishes or foods ever again, you could probably come up with another list of emotions. Where are you going?
When?
Yeah.
Same time.
Okay.
We should talk about flights.
Yeah.
Because then we could travel together.
A reason why I'm really happy to do this piece is because it gives folks an alternative for seeing our community. A lot of times Filipino Americans are homogenized and our identities are really flattened.
And we thank everybody for being here as well and for creating a community for us.
So the work that I do within myself and within the Filipino American community here in Detroit is indicative of the kind of work that needs to happen for anyone that's been displaced off their ancestral lands and has found it particularly harder or more difficult to celebrate their own traditions.
So I couldn't resist ending the show in a lounge chair. I mean, it is the holiday weekend, right? From all of us at One Detroit, I'm Christy McDonald. We'll see you next week. Take care. Enjoy the time with your family. I think I'm going to enjoy the time right here. Just like that. Yeah.
Masco Corporation is proud to manufacture innovative and environmentally friendly products for the home. Delta faucets, craft-made in Merillat cabinets, and Behr brand paints have all been designed with you in mind. Masco and its family of companies, serving Michigan communities since 1929.
Support also provided by the W.K. Kellogg Foundation, a partner with communities where children come first. The Cynthia and Etzel Ford Fund for Journalism at Detroit Public TV. The Detroit Journalism Engagement Fund, and by
Business Leaders for Michigan has 5 priorities to make Michigan a top 10 state. Achieve a balanced budget, cut long-term debt, fix our roads, improve all levels of education, further economic growth, plan for a stronger Michigan. How does diversity bring energy to us all? At DTE Energy, we believe that it's the contributions of all that build great communities. As a company, we grow stronger by welcoming the unique perspectives of everyone. As community members, we support our state's broad culture and heritage. From working closely with women and minority-owned suppliers to embracing our local cultures, DTE Energy is powering diversity. The DTE Energy Foundation is a proud sponsor of Detroit Public Television.
also brought to you by Ally and viewers like you. Thank you.